everyone, and welcome to No Off Season. I'm Zena Cato.
I'm Sabreena Merchant.
And I'm Ben Pickman.
And today on the show, we are joined by trailblazing former WNBA star Layshia Clarendon to talk all things W. And I love talking to Layshia because she's now my coworker out in the Bay. And so we're going to chat about CBA negotiations, expansion thoughts, and their take on what's made the Valkyries franchise so successful so quickly. But first, of course, we got to check in on the association, and the 2025 Commissioner's Cup Final is officially in the books. Indiana did their big one, defeating the Minnesota Lynx at home, by the way, on Tuesday night, and they did so, without Caitlin Clark. A lot of weapons on that team, folks, and that's exciting because, Ben, you were there. A lot of folks have been talking about this Indiana team without Caitlin Clark and what does that look like in practice. But before we dive into that, I think there's even a bigger story that you happen to be there for. And I feel like the entire sports world, whether you like women's basketball or not, was tuned in for this. Red Panda. What is the latest on Red Panda? What happened first and foremost?
Yeah, I basically became the Red Panda beat writer at The Athletic for the last 2 days after the Commissioner's Cup. Red Panda, for those who are uninitiated, and if you are, I would stop this podcast right now, go to YouTube and Google her, and you'll start to see some amazing acts, video acts. She is this famous halftime performer in both the NBA, the WNBA, the college basketball space. She's been performing, at least in the NBA, since the early 90s, in which she has this custom-built unicycle in which she flips bowls up and catches them with her feet, with her head, all over. It's an amazing thing to see. She is pretty universally beloved among fans, media, players. Everybody in the basketball space knows who she is. Probably, as big of a halftime act as you can get in the kind of non-singer-songwriter variety. All of that is context to say that she was at the Commissioner's Cup at Target Center on Tuesday night, and within 15 seconds of her act beginning, she fell off of her unicycle. And this was immediately a stunning sight because she is pretty near perfect in all of her performances in all the arenas she performs in. And then she clearly was in a lot of pain, and she struggled to get up. And after a couple seconds, they stopped the music. And then people came out and took away the ladder, which she initially climbs up on before getting onto the unicycle. And then she needed some help standing up. She walked to the baseline in pain. She then had to get wheelchaired off the floor. I started at that point, after writing some initial copy with our colleague Chantel Jennings, to just basically run the bowels of the arena to try and see what I could learn, who I could talk to, a la you would if you were a sideline reporter trying to get an injury update on a player. Like, that was me for Red Panda. I talked to one arena employee that night that said she was taken off in an ambulance to a local hospital. We later learned that was, in fact, the case. And we found out on Wednesday that she suffered a severe wrist fracture. Her manager told me in a statement that the left pedal of her unicycle had been damaged in transit, and that was kind of the initial cause of the fall. Some interesting details. She is expected back by the start of the NBA season, so that's an important one for people out there. And if you want a slightly more fun one, is that the Minnesota Timberwolves mascot actually drove Red Panda to the airport on Wednesday. She had already gone through a medical procedure on her wrist. The Timberwolves mascot drove her to the airport and helped her check in at, I guess the check-in counter. That would have been a sight to behold. Red Panda, the Timberwolves mascot, a custom-built unicycle. Everyone is obviously happy she's okay. She's going to need, I think, another second opinion for the second part of her wrist repair. But that was definitely the story for, I think, a lot of people coming out of Tuesday.
Everyone loves Red Panda. And for the record, I have never seen her have any mistakes at all. And so I can imagine just how scary it was to even see it. But happy to hear that she is on her road to recovery, and wishing her all the best from no off season to Red Panda. And also shout out to the entertainment industry, just having each other's backs, especially in the women's basketball and men's basketball space. But let's get back to the game, because that was a crazy outcome if you're a Lynx fan. It could be a crazy outcome if you're a basketball fan, period. The Lynx got out to an early lead, but then all of a sudden things just started clicking for the Fever. They went on a run. They came back from a 13-point deficit. They held the Lynx to almost scoreless for nearly 8 minutes. This is crazy. I'm wondering, Sabreena, what do you think happened? Do you think that the Lynx had some things to change up, or were the Fever just too much to handle, especially in that second half? What kind of tweaks are we talking about here for the Lynx?
Well, to me, this is the first time that the Fever have really looked like a Steph White team. You bring Stephanie White in after 2 years in Connecticut because of the defensive culture that she was able to sustain with the Sun. And she's very familiar with this Lynx team. The Connecticut Sun played the Lynx in a 5-game semifinal series during last year's playoffs. It's basically the same Minnesota team. So she has a lot of experience on how to scheme for that particular roster. And, you saw they really limited Minnesota's 3-point attempts. They stayed high, prevented the ball from really breaking into the paint all that often, which is not something Minnesota does, but it is like to score necessarily, but it is something they do to swing the ball out for 3-pointers. And so I think just the defensive game plan was awesome from the Fever, and what Sydney Colson in particular, I think, brought to the game in terms of her ball pressure when she came in that second quarter. You mentioned that 18-0 run that Indiana ends the first half on, I think it's like 8 minutes and 13 seconds that Minnesota doesn't score in that period. I thought Colson, the only Commissioner's Cup champion coming into this game from Indiana, and now they're all Commissioner's Cup champions, really changed the game with that particular brand of ball pressure. And you just saw all of the Fever really commit to that defensive effort. Like the way Sophie Cunningham was able to stay up high, I thought. McDonald, Colson, really excellent. Natasha Howard, so good on Nafisa Collier in that one-on-one matchup. And then what she was able to provide offensively. Honestly, offensively, I don't even think is a story. Like, I think Minnesota would be perfectly happy with their defensive effort in this game. It was just they could not score. And I think we have questions all season about, can Indiana bring the requisite defense to complement what is perhaps the most explosive offense in the WNBA? And this game was a resounding answer of yes. On any given day, their defense can rise to this level. And it's something that we've just been waiting to see. And it was an excellent showcase for that to happen.
Ben, this is the question now. Can that defense sustain them with Caitlin out? Sabreena hit the nail on the head. It's an explosive offense. And we've seen this, particularly I would say that Indiana New York Liberty first time out, you saw just how much they can get up and down the floor, how many options they have. And you saw that on display as well against the Lynx. But is defense enough? And can they be consistent while Caitlin Clark is still, dealing with that groin injury and has missed a bit of games?
I mean, history would say that no, the Indiana Fever have not been consistent enough on the defensive end of the floor. But Tuesday night, certainly, as Sabreena said, showed what they can do when they play their best, when they are as disciplined as they want to be, when they communicate the way they want to be, when, their point of attack defense, their ball screen defense, Sabreena called it out. Colson played the most minutes she had played since June 14th against New York in their big win in, I guess, Commissioner's Cup pool play. Ari McDonald, someone who provides a ton of energy, pushing pace on the offensive end, but also on defense. Like, watch how she fights over screens. Like, she was really impressive just kind of guarding Minnesota's lead guards, rather. We saw Courtney Williams struggle. We saw Kayla McBride struggle. I mean, it was an uncharacteristic shooting night for Minnesota. They did get some good looks. I mean, anecdotally, I want to say they missed 4 layups, point-blank layups in the first quarter. So they already were not playing their best. I don't think I've ever seen so many shots that just hit 2 or 3 parts of the rim and then bounced out as I saw in that second half. There were so many looks that it was just ping, 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 and then off by the Minnesota Lynx. So, one of those nights that is an off shooting night. But I think the Commissioner's Cup really is this, it is what you make it kind of game, right? If you are the Indiana Fever, you're making it as you're holding on to it as a potential turning point, as an example of how you can play, how, we, the Indiana Fever, can play defensively, about what is our ceiling. If you're the Minnesota Lynx, I think you just kind of throw it out a little bit. The Commissioner's Cup doesn't really matter. The stats get thrown out. They don't actually count for awards. And I think Minnesota, it was just one of those nights for them. They were due for it. They set career, season lows in all different kinds of categories. So to me, I agree with you both. More about Indy than it is about Minnie.
I'll say this. I'm with you on throwing the stats out, throwing the game out. Those, uncharacteristic night for Minnesota for sure. But you know what you can't throw out? $500,000, Ben. Okay. And that's some money for real for these WNBA players. Of course, there's a nice cash reward that comes with winning the Commissioner's Cup. $500K split evenly amongst the roster players. And in a post-game celebration on Instagram Live, Clark spoke her mind about the prize money, saying, quote, "You get more for this than you do if you're the WNBA Finals champion. It makes no sense. Someone tell Kathy to help us out. Now, this is the first time I've seen Miss Clark be vocal and call Kathy out directly. So what do you guys think about that comment? And does it make no sense?
What's interesting about the Commissioner's Cup payout is the league is actually shorting the players based on what's written in the CBA. They're supposed to provide $750,000 for in-season tournament payouts, and this is only $500,000 for the Commissioner's Cup. So you think about if they were actually paying out the $750K, that'd be astronomically more than what they get for winning the WNBA Finals, which is about $11,500. So on the one hand, get your money whenever you can. Like, that's why this game matters. That's why players are so excited to win. Like, you saw the way the Fever celebrated. That is the way you celebrate a championship.
They had the ski goggles in the locker room. Like, they were having a good time.
They celebrated that harder than Oklahoma City did in Game 7, honestly, for the
NBA
Finals.
Literally.
The celebration even came outside of the locker room. A few of us were talking to Sydney Colson post-game, and right as she finished her scrum right outside the Indiana locker room, like Caitlin Clark, Hull, a few other players came out and immediately started spraying her, and a few of us almost got soaked with champagne. I got out of there very quickly, thankfully.
There you go. There you go. I'm happy to hear that. But I am also happy for the Indiana Fever. I think there was a interesting tweet I saw about Ari McDonald's contract for the year and what she's getting paid in this, or her payout for winning the Commissioner's Cup is like just slightly more, I believe. And I thought that was really interesting. It's like, hey, this is why the CBA negotiations are happening.
Right, and these are all things that can be negotiated, right? When you think about what a player makes when they win the WNBA championship, like that is in the CBA. That is an official, thing that both the players and the league have agreed upon in their last deal. We have seen in recent years sponsors, brand partners come in and try and come up with creative solutions solutions, not even that creative solutions, to try and incentivize players or pay them more. When trophies and awards are on the line. I think about All-Star Weekend, right? How Affleck came in last year and, paid, I want to say $55,000 and $60,000 for the 3-point shootout and skills challenge winner. Alicia Gray won both of those. She won, like 2/3 something of her year-long salary in that one night, just by winning both of those events. They're doing that again this year. Coinbase, another corporate sponsor, has come in and thrown $120K in for the Commissioner's Cup and crypto that is split among players. Like, corporate sponsorship money comes in and suddenly like prize pools change. Do I think this is high on the list of priorities for players going forward? I don't really know. Like, to level the payouts, I'm not really sure. I mean, and I think if you asked a player too, the money is nice, but like, what would you rather have, a WNBA championship or the 40K? I think players on a certain team, the Minnesota Lynx, I bet would tell you that they'd rather have the championship in October. And the stat going around also post Commissioner's Cup was the last 2 years, the loser of the Commissioner's Cup has went on to win the WNBA championship that year. Right. So if you're a Minnesota Lynx fan, that is another stat to hold on to.
Okay, well, let's keep going around the association because there's been a lot going on behind the scenes, players being waived, players being traded, and lots of talk about it all. Of course, we got Nalissa Smith of the Dallas Wings being traded to the Aces for a 2027 first-round draft pick. The league is also welcoming a bunch of players back from Eurobasket. Leo Fibic in New York, Jessica Shepard came back from Slovenia for the Lynx. Of course, the Valkyries, Chechi Zandalicini, Janelle Salon, Temi Fagbenle, they make up the most of that cohort, but there's a lot of players here getting back onto their teams and getting ready for the next portion right before All-Star break. But one of them, fresh off of winning the whole thing in Eurobasket with her native team, Belgium, has been waived by the Golden State Valkyries, and that is Julie Vanloo.
As we've talked a lot to players and executives around the league about the Vanloo situation. It has obviously caused a lot of conversation around the league. So I'm wondering, you being based with the Valkyries, what do you know about that?
Yeah, I think also, like, on top of the league and players and coaches, et cetera, the fans are really the ones that are taking this hard. I mean, a lot of fans are saying, like, this was inhumane, this was not the right way to treat a player, et cetera. And so that was like my instinct as someone that covers the team for the fans, like wanting to understand what's true, what's not, what happened. So I kind of want to just like lay out the things that I've heard fans talk about and I've heard other outlets talk about. in terms of how this situation went down. So, of course, Julie Vanloo wins Eurobasket, and the whole conversation is around the fact that she is flying back early from celebrating with her team in order to land in the Bay to be prepared for her team with the Golden State Valkyries. And there's a conversation that she gets waived. Now, there's speculation as to, did she get waived while she was in the air? Why didn't the Valkyries reach out to her before she boarded? They could have had a conversation on FaceTime or Zoom, et cetera. I've seen all of these things being discussed. So from what I understand and talking to sources around the team and within the team, Julie Vanloo was boarding her flight around the time that the team, if you do the math backwards of 18 hours, and where she landed and where the team was, it was right after they finished playing the Seattle Storm. And the time frame that they had to talk to her on FaceTime, et cetera, was not going to be enough by the time she got on her flight. So they, one, allowed her to take this flight. I do not know who organized her flight. I don't know if the Valkyries had any control over telling her, let's cancel the flight or let's delay it or anything like that. But she gets on this flight, and when she lands, they meet up and they communicate to her that she's been waived. So this rumor that she was told and she found out while she was in the air is completely untrue. And also, one thing that I noticed when I was looking at the WNBA.com transaction page, so every day, all the player transactions are updated by 5 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Pacific. And if you notice, Janelle Salon and Chechi Zandalasini were reinstated on June 30th when Chloe Bibby and Bree Hall were also waived. And that happened by 2 p.m. Pacific on June 30th. But Julie Vanloo was not announced until July 1st on that website. And so the indication that they knew or they had made the decision, I don't know when they made the decision, but they had absolutely not communicated it to the league until after that deadline. So when she landed and when she was told definitely wasn't before, when they communicated to the league and when they made that decision, and then when they communicated to her, wasn't in the timeline that I'm seeing a lot of folks say that they knew before she got on the flight, they had communicated it to the league before she got on the flight, they had made that decision before she got on the flight, or that any of that happened while she was on the flight. I completely understand though, the two aspects of this, like all the fans that are like, yo, this is crazy. You get this person to come out, et cetera. They get cut when they land, like how insensitive or, whatever it is. When I got to practice yesterday, Natalie Nakase was being asked about this, and she genuinely, from my perspective, was like heartbroken. Like you could see that she had not had a great day the day before. Like she talked about feeling as if not only with Julie, but Chloe and Bree Hall, that she felt like she lost like kids. Like she was like, I don't want to say I'm not a mom, but I felt like I lost my kids, like in a way. And I know that's not going to resonate with some folks because the way that Julie, was dismissed in their minds, she could have been partying with Belgium and celebrating with her family and all the above. So I don't know how much that's going to change people's opinions, but I did want to make sure that it was clear that some of these rumors that are being made around when she got the information, et cetera, is not true. The other thing that also is not true is this conversation around the visa. That also is not a thing that even I think Julie made clear herself and the team has made clear that this decision and her flying back had nothing to do with her needing to be active on a visa that would allow her to play for other teams.
What I will say to all that, though, and I appreciate you clearing up some of what you understand on the situation, is I do think perception has sort of become reality for a lot of players around the league. Like I've talked to players on 3 different teams about what happened, and it definitely raised some eyebrows, right? Golden State, I think, has earned a lot of positive points in the court of public opinion up to this point in the season. And this is the first moment, I think, during the year among players that said, maybe not so fast. Like, this is a business. Let's see how they treat players going forward. Do I think this is going to impact how they, their ability to get free agents next offseason? No, I don't. But I do think players certainly took note of it. I talked to Julie Aleman, Vanloo's Belgian teammate at practice, Sparks practice on Thursday. And she was like, we understand that it is a business, but like she had given a lot to the fans of Golden State to the team. She was upset. Belgium's supposed to meet the king. Not only is it, a big celebration, but they were going to meet the king of Belgium. So, I do think like there's obviously a lot to this situation, but certainly not only was on the radar of fans, but players as well.
Yeah, I think
And maybe it doesn't
your
affect
point of
every free agent who wants to sign with Golden State, but we're talking about like Emma Miesemann coming from Belgium, potentially restarting her WNBA career. And that is a very specific player relationship that might matter more than some others when you're thinking about what organization to choose.
Yeah, it's tough. The whole purpose of like, it's a business, I completely get that. I think you're right, Ben, though, in the way that it was perceived by everyone, and then it caught fire in, the certain narrative around it, and how, especially Julie Vanloo being heartbroken and expressing that publicly, I think that also adds to it as well. It's tough. I'm just giving my perspective on what I saw, though. It doesn't seem like they're taking this lightly, and her being gone. But I will say this last part. I asked Natalie Nakase about what went into the decision, and she was saying we went 5-2 while Julie was out, and we can't underestimate that. And we also can't underestimate that we have to put the most competitive group together because we need to win now, not in a year or two like others expect us to as an expansion team, but we want to win now. And so that was another quote from Natalie Nakase, which I get. All right, on the other side of this break, we got my teammate Layshia Clarendon here. Don't go anywhere. We're talking a lot of stuff. CBA. We're talking Valkyries. Don't go anywhere. All right, welcome back to No Off Season, and we are so excited to welcome the one and only Layshia Clarendon to the show. Layshia, how are you, friend?
Hello. I'm great. Now that we're on here, technology,
Yes.
we made it.
Yes,
Doing it.
we had a little bit of technical difficulties to make sure, but I think it's just because we're about to have such a great conversation. The computers could not quite handle it. So it is quite perfect timing that we have you, because you're an expert on a lot of things, obviously basketball being one of them. But you played some roles as well within the world of women's basketball, particularly around the CBA and ensuring that players were well represented and, things around player welfare were cared for. So let's start with that big elephant that's in the room. The CBA negotiations, players and the league hashing out a new union contract. Of course, CBA taking care of things such as benefits, revenue share, salaries, everything in between that allows these pro athletes to show up to work and feel like pro athletes. Now, as the vice president of the Players Union, you were deeply involved in negotiations the last time around with the contract signed in 2020. I think this is one of the biggest misunderstandings right now when people look at the 2025 CBA and are questioning, well, why didn't they just get it done in 2020? Why are they asking for this revenue share thing now? They agreed to their salaries back in 2020. They agreed to this rev share model. And a lot of times I want to be like, but do you know what they actually got? Like, there's some other things that were really important that they also, had to negotiate, meaning make some compromises around in order to get those. So take us behind the scenes. What was it like? And what had you all learned from the last negotiations before that, which was in 2014, and it had low league involvement?
Yes. Oh, great questions. So, in 2013, I was a rookie. So I remember 2014 was happening. I was, I think, a player alternative rep on Indiana. Tamika Catchings was the president of the union. She had fought so hard to get player engagement. I think Jana Powell Marinelli, Tanisha Wright were all part of the union, and players just weren't. There was like an apathy around the league for engagement. And Catch worked really hard to shift that. And then NECA took over as president. I ended up being a player rep, ended up being vice president because Tamika Catchings was like, you need to get involved with the union. She literally straight up was like, you need to get, and I was like, okay. Like she was like, nah, you're going to be a part of it.
Catch tells you something, right?
Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Like I was so fortunate to play with one of the greatest leaders and players and defensive, like just machines. We could talk about her basketball for so long, but what she did and impacted our league, I think isn't talked about as much now that she's retired years later. So like knowing our history and understanding the people who carried us for so long. So NECA goes on to become president on VP. And the thing we really tried to shift was getting players to care and feel like they had a voice and to feel like this is your union. And then Terry Jackson became our director too, and phenomenal, amazing. She's like a mom to so many of us. Was just getting players to realize this affects you and to feel empowered. They're like, we have a union. Do you know how important that is for labor rights? Like, this is your job and you're affected and you pay your labor dues no matter if you show up to the meeting or not. Like, you're giving your money for these dues and this is affecting you. So we really had to shift like the engagement narrative for players to care. And I think NECA and the entire leadership team did a really good job of people feeling invested. And then in 2020, the really big shift that happened was that the league blew up because the world was paused. Right? We were doing the Say Her Name campaign. We were finally playing where all eyes were looked on us. Baseball was paused in the summer. The NBA was paused and the WNBA was on full display. And so we signed in 2019 and then 2020, the league blows up from a social justice perspective, from people caring and paying attention and finally giving us the flowers that we so deserve. So if you look and you say, why did they sign this deal in 2020 versus 2019? And when we signed that deal that I was a part of, we were fighting for people, for fans to pay attention and to realize that we share hotel rooms. So for most of my career, at least 6 of the years, I don't know, we shared hotel rooms. Like we were fighting for a basic level of dignity as a professional athlete. And so we fought for that. We fought for rookies to have a better scale. We fought for moms to be able to make their salaries 100% of their salary instead of 50% of their salary if they decided to have a child. And you've seen the explosion of parents in our league, which has been a beautiful direct correlation from that last CBA that we signed.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that actually, because, we've been talking to players this time around about what sort of things they want to see included in the new CBA. And a lot of them have said just better accommodations for parents, whether that's like childcare or, stipends for daycare and all sorts of things. So I guess just how is it that a women's professional league exists without those protections for so long? And then what do you sort of see as the next frontier for the WNBA in that regard?
Yeah. So in the last CBA, you do get a player stipend. So that was something, I think I got it for my last couple years while I was playing, which is great. It goes into your direct deposit. You get guaranteed a 2-bedroom apartment because some parents were having to subsidize themselves and pay for their second bedroom for their kids. So automatically get 2-bedroom apartment. Now that they're chartering, I know children are a lot more likely to be allowed on the airplane with you. That's a big difference from flying commercial, trying to book a seat for your child, and now you can just take them on the plane. When I played at LA, Dearica had her 2 kids often on the road with us. It was really beautiful to see that direct impact, but it's still not enough, right? It was revolutionary what the WNBA did for women's sports leagues, but there's still ways to go. So I think we're going to get in the salary conversation. It's like, yeah, a childcare stipend, is it enough to cover childcare in America? Right. No, not quite, especially not with the rigorous WNBA schedule. It's a great start, but it needs to be more. And eventually, people need to make more money so they can pay to have their full-time nannies, pay to have the childcare that they deserve to have on the road.
And I think it's important, before we keep going, to quickly summarize what changed after the 2020 CBA. So compensation went up 53%, which was great. Then the childcare stipend, as you mentioned, $5,000 childcare stipend annually. The mandate that any player that had children would be given a 2-bedroom housing. So if it was apartments, if it was suites, if it was whatever, it would be 2 bedrooms at least. There's also fertility planning and family planning, up to $60,000 covered, which I think is huge as well. And then the chartered planes, for those that just heard Layshia mention this. So back then, you would be flying commercial to potentially back-to-back games, playoff games, and in those commercial flights, it's not first class all the time. It was coach as well. So you were subject to, if a flight was canceled, if a flight was delayed, if your baggage was delayed, you were in the ghetto too. So it was pretty rough in terms of that. But then this 2020 CBA changed, not the recent charter change that we've seen in 2024. The first charter change in 2020 was that you could charter back-to-back games and then 2 playoff games. And then in 2024, and we can see a lot of different things that could have been the impetus behind that, whether it was Brittany Griner and the experiences that she had in coming back to the States and from Russia and being accosted by folks in airports, or it was also just the fact that the league had blown up. These women were celebrities. And so people were also just like following them in airports as well. And so that's when there was additional funding allocated for chartering flights in 2024. So all that to say, like, there has been growth, but to Sabreena's point, like, there's still a new level and a new frontier to be had. And as Layshia's mentioning too, to keep growing on that.
Yeah, like what Zena was saying, with WNBA players being celebrities now and just the level of popularity that the players have and how prominent the league is on like the national consciousness. I guess, how do you see the dynamics changing between like how much power the players have versus how much the league has when it comes to these, new round of negotiations?
We're seeing it shift dramatically. Like in the 2020 CBA, one of the main things we fought for, or one of our main tactics was like getting public opinion on our side to be like, to know and care and be like, oh, if the really big thing we had to stand on was trying to be like, oh, does Adam Silver care about women? And that's why we had our Bet on Women shirt. So it was like we had to get people to make sure that they were going to invest in women and bet on women. And so we're like basically trying to do this public campaign. And now like people care and all eyes are on us. So the power, to your point, Sabreena, has shifted dramatically. We're like, I want to be a fly on the wall for those calls, not really because of so many calls. Like, I'm done for my service for 6 years.
Dang.
And through a pandemic.
Committed.
But yeah, I got my little plaque out there. I should have brought it. It was like, thank you for your service. I look at it all the time and I'm like, I like bow at it. Like, you're welcome.
That is
like, I should be able to
hilarious.
board the plane first now.
Right.
For all my service.
You're calling up. Well,
But,
now you cover the Valkyries. You're like, let me get that first seat right behind the pilot. Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, it's kind of crazy to think, like, I think that the power dynamic question is a great one because it does feel like the public is on your side now, right? All these people are like, pay them more. Look at all the things that they've done. And then yet you see Satou Sabally come out this week and say publicly that the first offering that the league offered was, quote, a slap in the face, which is like, how are we not even starting at a level that we understand what's at stake here and who the players are in this conversation? So I don't know if you ever experienced something like that when, you guys were negotiating the 2019-2020 CBA, but what can you tell us about Satou coming out with this sort of a statement? And what does that do in terms of the communication to the union, from the union to the league? Like, that is a very clear message, in my opinion. Like, how purposeful is that? What does that statement do? How can it help or impact, at least, the conversation?
Yeah. Satou's like the person who I literally was like, she's the torchbearer for me because of her fire. And she's so unapologetic and she's willing to speak out and she's going to call it what it is. So I love that Satou said that out loud and letting people know, because people are paying attention. They're like, what's going on with the CBA? Like, it's definitely, there's like a private aspect of it that needs to be kept, between the players and the league, but there's updates that people want. So I think it's one, players being unafraid to talk about it publicly and sending a message to the league that says like, yeah, we're not settling for less. Like, we know our power now. We understand where we are. We see the numbers. They are clear as day, right? We see what's happening. We know what's going on with the TV deal, with the media rights. We see the ticket sales going up. So we're expecting like, the league, it's a business. So, right, they're going to try and maximize their profits on one end. They're going to try and focus on, oh, we already giving you guys charters. We're giving you so much, like, I'm not sure if the narrative is still be grateful, take time, look, expansion is coming. But the players know their power now, and they know that it's time to pay up. Like, the salaries, it's time. It is time. Players are fed up. And so I'm very curious to see if they're when February comes and free agency comes, which is going to come quick, we know the summer ends faster than we think, and we're going to get through the holidays. And like, is there a deal agreed upon, or are we looking at the first potential WNBA lockout this season? And right? Like, those are conversations that even internally you start to say, save your money, save them coins, because if it hits the fan, we have to be prepared to do what's best for the entire league for the growth of what's next for women's sports.
Yeah, that's something that we've, internally talked a lot about, just like our colleagues here, about does it make sense with all of this momentum for the league to even consider a lockout? Because, do you worry about what that would mean in terms of like not being on screens for a significant amount of time? Like you mentioned, 2020 being such a transformative season for the league because you had this presence while, other sports weren't happening. I guess, and I know you're obviously not in the union conversations, no, but like, how are you sort of reckoning with this is our moment, we need to take a stand, versus can we really afford to stop this train as it's like exploding right now?
So in 2020, I think the players knew like we couldn't afford to not be a part of it. So that was a big part of playing, was like, oh, we have to play and we have to figure out how to play, because us not being on TV, to your point, is not good for the growth of the brand. But now the power has shifted and people are paying attention. So now the pressure, I think, is more on the league than on the players to say, oh, if you're not playing, why aren't we playing? Like, it's more like the league, why aren't you paying the players? Look at the Valkyries, they're selling out. Look at Indiana, look at the numbers across the league, look at the media rights that you've sold. Why wouldn't you be paying the players what they're owed? So I think that shift in narrative and in conversation now kind of puts more of the onus on the league than the players. And to see that cycle change I'm super proud of it, and it makes me like deeply appreciate all the work that the union has done and has earned the right to be in this moment. And so I know NECA, especially having the continuity of having gone through it before, is deeply prepared to lead these players to know their power and know their worth in this moment in time.
I mean, speaking of people who have gotten plaques, NECA deserves probably a few of those for what she's done for the union over the last decade.
Just a few,
I really do.
She'll probably get one.
I just respect and love just how much, NECA, like, give her flowers, especially as that leader. And as you mentioned, the continuity in her stance as a leader for the players. Like, she has been unapologetic, very similarly, but also very fact-based in the way that she is unapologetic about what the players deserve and how they should be incorporated in this. And I think it makes it a lot easier to be able to be fact-based when the numbers are so undeniable. You can't ignore them. And Layshia, we get the opportunity every day that we work covering the Valkyries to see it firsthand, right? Like, whether you're in the arena, whether we're in the studio, we feel it here in the Bay, just how much momentum there is behind this team, the dedication to this team from this fan base. And it's not just here in the Bay. People around the country are tuned in, they're excited, and it's, again, not just the Valkyries either, but let's focus even just on the Valkyries, because they're one of the teams that is a perfect example of why the league is growing, how the league is growing, how the personalities are driving this growth, the players are driving this growth. But I want to talk to you a little bit more from like a, analyst perspective, as we are studio analysts for them. What do you think is so special about what they've built? And as we think about expansion, because it's coming, Portland's coming, Toronto's coming, Cleveland's coming, Detroit's coming, Philadelphia's coming. Yes, got to say them all out. What do you think other franchises can look at the Valkyries and see and say, ooh, let's absolutely do that?
Oh my God. Besides hire Coach Natalie Nakase, other than that.
If only everyone could do that, right?
Right. Also, Coach of the Month,
passed on her,
I believe. Yes, got to give her flowers for that. Congratulations. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I think what other franchises can look at is, one, like the branding and the rollout, the intentionality from day one from the Valkyries has been excellent. It has been like chef's kiss from the name of the Valkyries to understanding the mythology behind it to the color scheme of no other pro team having the lavender color scheme. Come on. To the way they rolled it out before there was even a team. There was no basketball team, but they got people excited about the brand of the Valkyries. So like they nailed it 100% from a marketing perspective. And then from a roster perspective, Ohema has done an excellent job building a team. From a GM perspective, I think the hiring process with getting the right GM in the role, someone who knows the WNBA, who knows the players, who knows the overseas market, clearly has done an excellent job with the players she's brought in. And then overall, the investment that they've put in, the amount of money that this team has put in to make sure they are in Chase Center, in the right arena, where they're going to be treated like the professionals that they are. This never felt like a B list to the NBA, right? It never felt like, oh, this is the W, so it's like going to be in a second tier versus what the NBA is. From day one, the Valkyries have made this known that like, one, we want to win. Like we're putting money, we are in the sports game to win. And we're not only going to say we want to win, we're going to put our money behind the product to show that we want to win. So I think what's happening with the Valkyries is that when you invest in women's sports, shocker, right? Like when you put the blindfold on and say, is it men or women's basketball? It doesn't matter. We're going to put the same amount of energy, effort, intentionality, and coins behind the team. Look what happens in a fan base that was so prepared and so ready to have a WNBA team. It's like I could cry. I actually cried the day that the team was announced, the morning I was watching on my phone with my partner. And because we've known for so long what this, like the Bay is so special to me. I went to Cal. I live in the Bay.
And
I
you're a
live in
Hall
Oakland,
of Famer,
like,
by the way. Let's just put a space for that.
Thank you.
Layshia went to Cal and she like they are a Hall of Famer. They are a Hall of Famer at Cal. So let's just put that out there. Thanks. Go ahead.
So it's special to see from a player who just retired too. Like it's just to go from a player, you know, to a fan and to a media member, an ex-player. Like I'm all of these hats that I get to wear at one time, and a member, a player who was a part of the union to be one of the people who stands on Tamika Catching's shoulders, right? And then to be the one that watching Kelsey Plum, watching Satou Sabli stand on my shoulders, like happily seeing where the growth of the league goes is such a beautiful thing to witness.
You know, you see what's happening in Golden State and just what a remarkable story and situation that has been. I mean, you think about these 5 expansion teams that are coming down the pipeline and how exciting it must be for those cities to be able to experience this with their communities. I guess, you know, I'm just wondering, you know, Satou mentioned this, how she's excited to see the growth of the league, but could we get more roster spots first, right? Like, what do you think, I guess, about this pace of expansion that the WNBA is embarking on, even though we do have this phenomenal test case first in Golden State?
I think the timing's right. I like the rollout of kind of scaling the years coming. I think I'd be curious to see the argument internally of, are we expanding teams without giving roster spots, to Satou's point? Because that has been the league's reasoning in the past, is like we're expanding so we can't give roster spots. But look who the Valkyries just had to cut. We talked about this, Chloe Bibby, right? They just had to let go of Julie Vanloo. They just had to let go of players that could be impacting the team. And knock on wood, right? Injuries happen every single season. So the Valkyries have showed us what it looks like to be next man up. But they've done a great job of like implementing those players right back into the system. But the problem is when you don't have those extra roster spots and you get in the throes of a season and the Chloe Bibbies get picked up and the Van Loos get picked up and you need extra players, you're pulling people in and you're trying to, it affects your product because you're trying to get people to understand your system. You're trying to pull them in all at once. And it ultimately becomes a player safety and health issue, which we've talked about from day one. With the rigor of the schedule changing, with the 40+ games that players are playing, flying across the country, even with chartering, it's difficult to manage your health and to manage the overall quality and product of the game. So as the league expands, I think it'll be really interesting to see, do we get that 2 or 3 roster spots? Is there some kind of developmental league that happens? Is there somewhere to pull talent from? Do we get to 14? Right now we're at 11. You get depending on your salary, how much you pay players. which I think next year will become an issue when the new CBA comes and everyone pays all their big time players a ton of money and you can't afford to keep extra roster spots. That's really going to be a pivotal result of this CBA is, do we get extra roster spots? Expansion or not, there still needs to be more roster spots across the entire league.
What you're saying actually just made me think of something else that I learned. You know, we just spoke about, before you joined, Layshia, we talked about the Julie Vanloo situation out in the Bay. And something that I learned looking through the CBA is that these teams, this is how strict the roster spot situation is. It's like, it's not only that you can only have 12 active members, you can only have 12 active members in your city at a certain period of time, which also fed into having to tell Julie Vanloo upon arrival, we're waiving you at that time. Like, the rules that, you know, implicate the way that teams also handle players, handle these waves, it's all laid out there in the CBA. And so there's a lot there for the players to negotiate. We'll see where they land on that. But on your point of, there's levels to this, and I really love the way you close it out of like Kelsey and Satu now standing on your shoulders. Like, they now understand the levels to it, not only from what they experienced coming into this league, but they now see the quality of play in this league right now and how elevated it is. And that's something I want to ask you about, you know, before we close this out. Like, what are your thoughts on how much better the play is, the quality of play, and also how integrated the league is with all of these international players coming in and bringing their flair of the game? What does the league feel like to you watching it now, analyzing it, versus when you played?
God, I watched
the bulk
these
of when
players.
you played, because you just stopped playing.
Yeah, exactly. 8 months ago or whatever.
Right.
Last year. I think one of the biggest things I see, especially when I watch even the college game, right, because that's the talent we're getting coming into the pro game, is I see these players like Paige doing moves that I'm like, I learned that in the last 5 years. Like, what? Like, y'all are right. Like, that's the growth of the league, where I'm like, oh, y'all are already in college, right? Icing screens. There's teams that have been icing screens a little bit in college for years, right? Really good programs. But like the Stanfords, Atara Vanderveers have been doing high level scouting for years. But you're starting to see across the college game, the level of talent just expand. So when I watch like a Paige Beckers come off a dribble handoff, read it, shoot right behind the screen, it's like, boom, like her reads, her timing, the finishes that players are doing, which excite me because I love player development. I love watching like what specific players do that makes them really good. And so things that players are doing, like the stop and go to get someone to stop in their tracks, learning how to do the hand fight, throw someone off, the Kayla McBride, push someone into a screen, right?
Oh my God, she's so good
get
at that.
off of the stagger. She literally pushes people into the screen. I played with her. It's finally like I get to be a benefit of this pushing into the screen. And
Love
so
that.
to give credit to the up and coming talent and the way it's like shifting, and that's like feeding into our league, and that talent shift that's happening, and then the development that's happening in our league, because you don't have to go overseas every year. So right, we saw Brianna Stewart tear her Achilles a few years ago playing overseas. And I think that shift for players, one, starting to make more money so you can stay home, you can rest your body, and then you can develop. So you're not in this year-round cycle where you're constantly playing just to feed your family, make enough money to have your nanny, right, to pay the bills, to have the quality of life that you should as a pro. You can develop your game. You get that off season to add to your repertoire. You get to watch film with your coach. Teams are investing in bringing players in the off season. You're starting to see this inswell of training camp is only 10 days to 2 weeks to 3 weeks is the longest possible amount that training camp is. So you're starting to see players come into market early. Coach Natalie Nicase talked about that. They had a ton of players in market early, so they're starting to get their chemistry, they're starting to develop, they're starting to learn the system with each other. All of these factors are feeding into like why the product is getting better on the court, and it's so exciting to watch. Or I can remember early in my years in the league, there were some players you could sag off of and be like, we're just not going to guard this player, right? Like, oh, this player can't necessarily dribble left. Like, I've played for a decade, so now over a decade, to say I've seen a decade of change in the WNBA is pretty remarkable across the board. And so to see it from a development standpoint is really fun and exciting. And there's just so much growth of where the league is going to go, just from a talent and a skill perspective. Straight X's and O's of like what the players are doing between the lines. Like we talked about Chloe Bibby's release before and her flick of the wrist and how good of a shooter she is. Like, I could just talk about this all day because it's just so exciting.
You guys see
not-
why I get excited to go to work?
Yeah.
I love when I get to cover with Layshia. I am always learning something new. I'm seeing something new. Like, we'll be sitting there watching film and Layshia will be like, oh man, they got to hit the nail. They got it. Oh man. And I'm like, wait, what happened? What was it? Did I miss something? And like, mind you, I play basketball too, but there's a way of seeing the game that Layshia has over 10 years of playing ball that is really special, but particularly seeing the difference between what is elite level talent versus like, oh, you just play basketball. Like that is, I think, is a very, it's hard to see as a fan. And so it's really cool to be able to talk to Layshia and be able to learn from you about the difference between someone being elite and special and doing something unique and or doing something incredibly skilled versus like, oh, they're just playing hoops. Because it'd be crazy to think you can make the WNBA these days and someone just sag off of you. Like that feels like
No,
not
right?
normal. No. Go ahead, Sabrina. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, as much as I would love to keep talking about basketball for eons and eons and eons, I do think it's important that we close here. It's technically not Pride Month anymore. This episode is coming out on July 4th, but that doesn't matter. We can't have Layshia on and not talk about this. I mean, you were the first
Always
openly
Pride, yeah.
non-binary and transgender player in the WNBA, and you've spoken about how you saw the league change in regards to the LGBTQ community and players. I guess I'm wondering how you would characterize that evolution and just where do we go from here, with everything that's happening to transgender athletes in this country?
Oh, y'all with the hard-hitting questions. I've seen, I mean, I've
And
seen
yes,
the
it is
league
always Pride.
change. Yes, it's always Pride. So I love that. I've seen the league change in ways of like, in 2013, the WNBA did the first marketing campaign with CoverGirl, the first time like a league specifically marketed to the LGBT community in 2014, actually. So it was my second year. And the first time we didn't actually end up wearing the Pride shirts because that's a long story, because players weren't supportive internally. But I've seen from that evolution to players not necessarily feeling like they could be out, right? That kind of era where we knew players were out, but we weren't really talking about it. And the league definitely wasn't marketing those players. I always talk about Simone Augustus should have been such a bigger star in terms of marketability because her personality is amazing. She's one of the greatest players to ever play the game, right? But because the league was not and society was not ready to embrace a Black woman with dreads, right? But now look at Courtney Williams and what she's doing online and how Courtney has been embraced. Those are direct correlations between the decade of change and where the league has grown and where the league has started to market players authentically for who they are. And look at the audience, look at Courtney's podcast with her dad and what her and Natisha Heidemann are doing as
We love the stud buds.
Stud buds.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yep, the stud buds are great.
And how that's so unique to our league in comparison to men's sports of how gender fluid our league is, how we're willing to, what the friendships look like in our league, how we're talking about gender across the spectrum in our league of even the term studs, right, in the queer community and what that means for Black women. And that growth for the league has just been remarkable to see from me watching one of the greatest players, Simone Augustus, not get the flowers she truly, truly deserved in the star power. And she had a phenomenal career, won many championships, to seeing the marketability of what the league is doing and embracing Courtney Williams and marketing us how we deserve to be and really embracing the Blackness of the players in the league and the queerness of the players in the league, right? Not every player in the league is queer and Black, but not shying away from that fact of we have these two intersecting factors in our league and look at how unique and special and creative a player like Courtney is and how tapped in people are and want to hear what she has to say and are entertained by it.
Yeah. And I also think that the marketability of their chosen families too, right? Like that always has been a thing in the face of the league conversation across sports, is having this person and whoever their partner is and their kids be a thing. And it's always been very heterosexual, very, one partner, 2.5 kids, like, kind of 1950s-ish in the way that is shown up in that world. And so I love when you see team social handles like shout out queer partners and congratulate players when their partners have children. Those are things that I think the league would have stayed away from a while ago, and celebrating that and being able to let people know that these are their lives and these are who these players are beyond their basketball. So I would say, Sabreena, I don't know if I speak for you, but I think, Layshia, we got to give you an applause for helping, change that narrative and helping that be brought about. I know a lot of players say very positive things about what you've done and what you've gone through in order to do it for some of these players to be able to be themselves in all ways, not just the players that identify as queer and Black or both, but for all players to be able to show up as their true self. So shout out to you, Layshia. Keep doing the work. Keep going to work, because I love when you show up. It's really fun. And we're going to have you back.
There.
We definitely want to have you back. But before you go, we have one more segment. It's called Set Your Screen. So stay tuned. All right, well, it is Friday, so before we go, we got to tell you how to set your screen, presented by BetMGM. Make a fast break for on-court action with the WNBA Odds Boost token. Use your token to get a bigger payout on a winning WNBA bet. Bam! I didn't mess that up, BetMGM. How about that? All right, what are we watching, guys, this weekend? Of course, Layshia and I will be watching a lot of Valkyries, but outside of that, Layshia, anything else that's on your screen? What do you set your screen to?
Outside of that, I'm definitely going to say Seattle, New York, too. I probably stole someone's, but yeah. Ton of Valkyries, Seattle, New York. I'm curious to see how Seattle bounces back from that Valkyries loss the other day. That spanking, actually.
Spanking is the correct terminology, yes.
It is. That is correct. And particularly, I just also want to give a big shout out to Skylar Diggins for the transparency of her post-game comments of what happened. I haven't seen a player that, like, outside of like maybe Anthony Edwards, be that clear about how they got their butts whooped, and how much better the Valkyries were at other things that they were not good at. And so I just love when players are like that, because that's when you can show they know what they need to work on, they know what they need to get better at. And that's why I also am choosing the Seattle New York game, because with those comments and that energy, I'm like, ooh, what are they about to launch at 1 p.m. Eastern against New York? Let's see. Sabreena, what are you thinking?
So I know the Sun have lost 9 games in a row, but they did just bring in Layla Lacan after her stint with France at Eurobasket. She has not yet played in the WNBA, and she was one of the players I was most excited about in the 2024 draft. So they just activated her. Hopefully she gets to play soon. And if you're looking for a reason to tune into Connecticut games, that's the one.
I am very excited about Layla Lacan. I just love all Team France, but Layla Lacan and Carla Late, like, they have this like spitfiery energy to their games. I'm pumped to see what it looks like and translates into the W. Plus, I love when France is here. I mean, there are so many. Layla, I just need you to call up Ileana. Let us know what's going on with Ileana Repair. Where's she at? Let us know. All right, it's time to close this out. I appreciate you guys coming and listening with us. To Layshia, breaking down the CBA experience. I'm so grateful for this. I think a lot of people don't know all of the details behind it, and they also don't know who was in that conversation in 2020 and why it was so pivotal. So appreciate you breaking that down and all the other things, and you'll be back. I will make sure of it. Happy 4th to folks, and we'll see you back here on Tuesday. Always, before you go, subscribe, like it, wherever you're at, leave us comments, talk to us, let us know what you think. I haven't heard anybody say anything about our name, so at this point, that means Philadelphia, Cleveland, Detroit, you know where to find us. We can help you with the marketing plan. And then, of course, head on over to our partner, Yahoo Sports Hub, for more content, sports.yahoo.com/women's sports. On behalf of The Athletic, Ben, Layshia, Sabreena, I'm Zena Cada. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time. Thanks for tuning in to No Offseason. To hear more, be sure to like and subscribe. We drop new episodes every Tuesday and Friday.